Come on in. Welcome to Idled Out, where we talk all things Survivor. My name is Luke, and today we're looking back at my preseason Survivor 43 predictions. If you haven't watched my preseason cast assessments before, I do things a little differently. Not only do I accurately try to predict how someone will play and how they will do, but I also give each player an award. Who doesn't like awards? It's like high school superlatives, Survivor style. The Purple Kelly Award for most likely to be invisible, for example. The Sandra Diaz Twine Award for most likely to win the game. You get the idea. And because I love holding myself accountable, as we go through each player in order of elimination, I'll award myself 1 point for an accurate or mostly accurate prediction, half a point when I was partially there, and 0 points when I was way off, for a total of 18 possible points. Each season, I aim to be at least halfway accurate, so 9 points is the goal here. Is it time for me to take a victory lap for a preseason of accurate predictions, or is it time to pay the Survivor Piper? Let's find out. All that said, let's take a look back at my preseason Survivor 43 cast predictions. Beginning with our first boot, I gave Mariah the Donathan Hurley Award for most likely to win the Sia Award. An award to win an award. Can I amend this to the Sia Award? Okay, so Mariah did not last long enough for Sia to even remember her, but I do think I accurately predicted that Mariah's over-the-top positivity would put her on the outs of her tribe. Here's what I originally said. I think she's a shoo-in as one of the most popular characters of the season, but I'm worried her energy could be a liability. I think on Survivor, massive personalities like hers can get grating quickly, and I think she could come across as overeager if she starts singing and dancing at camp. On the plus side, at least Mariah knows she's a lot, so if she can strategically rein that in, I think she'll have legs in the game. I could see Mariah as one of the first out from her tribe, or I could see her going deep. It all depends on her tribe's tolerance for her aggressive positivity. Mariah ended up on the outside of her tribe early, but if she'd avoided being the first boot and Baca continued their winning streak, I totally could see her at the end of this game. Still, while I think Mariah's energy eventually would have worn down Baca, she wasn't as OTTP as I thought she would be, so I'm gonna give myself the same amount of points as Tribal Council's Mariah survived. 0. Moving on to second boot Justine, who I awarded the Sophie Clark Award for most likely to be an unexpected challenge beast. Alright, so Justine participated in 2 challenges, so who knows if she's actually good at them. But I also predicted that Justine was getting written off as a pretty face pre-season, and that her career in sales would make her an under-the-radar threat. Here's what I said. I totally think that being in sales is one of the best possible careers you can have going into Survivor, because you need to be both persuasive and charming in that business. So it really sounds like she's got the physicality and the communication skills that are necessary to succeed in those pre-merge team comps. My only concern? She says she wants to emulate Joe Englem. That's fine, but let's not do the whole Joe trajectory, please. You know, being in sales is one of the best possible careers you can have going into Survivor if your name is Cody. Justine's sales career made her a liability on Vessi, though, just because the other salesperson on the tribe fears salespeople. Because Justine was not the underrated challenge and social threat I anticipated, I've got to give myself 0 points on this one. Unless Justine wants to sell me half a point. No? Okay. Next, let's look at Nneka, the recipient of the Tom Laidlaw Award for most likely to be way too loyal. This award has shown up in all 3 of my new era predictions, and Nneka fully embodies the unflinching loyalty that I envision for this award more than any other player in recent memory. Like I always say, this person is final 5 or first 5 out. No exceptions. Nneka was this person for Jesse on Vessi, but when they lost the challenge, things got messy. I don't know why I rhymed there. Anyway, here's what I originally said. As for Nneka herself, she grew up in Nigeria and immigrated to the US while she had 2 toddlers and a third on the way. She made a life and a community for her and her family in the US, so she clearly has a lot of life experience that will inform her game. I get the sense that for Nneka, loyalty will trump all. If she's successful, she'll be a reliable vote for a more powerful player, and if she's not, she'll be one of the first people out of the game. I'm giving myself a full point for my Nneka prediction. She played literally exactly like I said she would by aligning with a stronger player, Jessie, and hanging her hat on her loyalty. And if she hadn't been cut loose early as a challenge liability, I think she would have gone all the way to the end with Jessie and Cody. And I guess in one sense, she did go all the way to the end with them, all the way to the end of episode 3. Moving on to Lindsay Carmine, who I gave the Chrissy Hoffbeck Award for most likely to break the mom stereotype. What I meant by that is that moms get pigeonholed into being tribe caregivers, but Chrissy really broke the mold by being unapologetically sneaky and strategic while also being a mom. And I guess Lindsay did too. She was really good at sneakily blindsiding herself. Really good at blindsiding herself. Here are my original thoughts on how Lindsay would do. I'll just say it. I think Lindsay is going to be a force in this game. Lindsay says she is going to play hard, embrace the fast pace of the game, and have no qualms about backstabbing her allies, and I believe her. Don't sleep on Lindsay. I anticipate she'll be around for the long haul, and I think a lot of this cast will be nursing some blindside bruises when she's done with them. In my defense, who could have anticipated that Lindsay would take being in one of the best positions on her tribe and then paranoia herself out of the game? Lindsay had great gameplay, great tribe positioning, and great social reads when her tribe was winning, but the second she conceivably could actually get votes, she prescribed herself 250 milligrams of paranoia to be taken orally every 5 seconds. I do think she broke the mom mold, but I can't realistically give myself any points for predicting that Lindsay would be the blindside queen when she only blindsided herself. Next, we have Gio, the winner of the Zeke Smith Award for most likely to catch big move-itis. Good thing Lindsay was on his tribe to diagnose his condition. I predicted Gio would think he was masterminding votes while overplaying wildly, and I was right. Here's what I said about Gio preseason. I'm really getting pre-merge overplaying flameout vibes from him, a la Jeremy Crawford or, dare I say it, Zane Knight? Reading Gio's bio, I get the impression he feels he has something to prove. I'm feeling like Gio is going to be his own worst enemy, probably target one of the bigger players on his tribe early, and get rewarded with a pre-jury trip for all his trouble. Full points. Gio is one of my most accurate predictions of this season. Gio was only saved from going out in fourth by Lindsay diving in front of him and taking the bullet, and him surviving that vote only emboldened him further in his belief that he was secretly running the show with Ryan and Carla. Gio thought he had Ryan in his back pocket, thought he was collecting powerful advantages, and thought he was going to send Cassidy out of the game. Fortunately for him, only the first two were true. Moving on to our last technically pre-merger, Ellie, whom I gave the Drea Wheeler Award for least likely to be able to control her threat level. Ellie's downfall at Gabler's hand was one of the most enjoyable in recent memory, and I loved watching her. But how did I think she would do preseason? Ellie's job requires that she be perceptive and likable, but I think her fatal flaw in the game will be that she's just so clearly perceptive and likable. I could definitely see her leaning into the social butterfly role too much and getting caught when other players compare notes. I wouldn't be shocked to see Ellie go far, but I'm actually kind of feeling a shock pre-merge boot here. I'm not sure that Ellie's flaw in the game was her threat level. It's that she was dismissive of Gabler and thought he was a clueless pawn. On the other side, she was the obvious strategic and social head of the Baka tribe, and that made her a palatable consensus for all the other players when Gabler pushed to get her out. So she wasn't exactly controlling her threat level all that well. I accurately anticipated a surprisingly early exit, but it wasn't really for the reasons I thought. She just got Gablered. Half a point. Let's move on to our official merge boot, sorry Ellie, and our final pre-juror, Dwight, winner of the Ian Rosenberger Award for Too Nice for Survivor. I had a few concerns about Dwight preseason. He's young, and he's nice. and that's not historically a good recipe on Survivor. Here's what I originally said about Dwight. In his interviews, he's saying all the right things. He knows the social game is king. He wants to emulate Wendell. But listening to him talk, I very strongly get the sense that he lacks the killer instinct needed to succeed long term on this show. He's just really giving me too trusting and too laid back. I'm worried he's gonna get eaten alive. I can totally see him in a situation where he puts way too much trust in the wrong person and they stab him in the back. Dwight went further than I expected, but otherwise, I believe this is a pretty accurate prediction of how he would play. Dwight was initially too trusting of Jesse and was undone by his Vessi buddies when they jumped ship and sent him home. But in Dwight's defense, who didn't put too much trust in Jesse only to get ruined by it later? True to my predictions, Dwight was naive and overly trusting in the game, and his allies saw greener pastures without him. I'll give myself a full point here, because I'm about to need all the points I can get. Next up is Janine, who I gave the Sandra Diaz Twine Award for most likely to win the season. I selected Janine as my winner pick because she seemed like the most socially aware player pre-season, and I expected her to have an understated pre-merge where she builds bonds, and then uses those bonds to build her resume in the second half. Yeah, about that. Here's how I originally read Janine. Of all the Kim Spradlin name drops on this preseason, and there are a lot, Janine's rings most true to me. She really seems tuned into the social elements of Survivor in a way that most people aren't. I think the best players in Survivor are people who can quickly understand the social dynamics of a room and are most authentically themselves. Janine comes off as the most perceptive and authentic person in the cast, and that's why I think she'll win it all. I genuinely feel bad for Janine. Once the tribes came together, she had a rough 3-episode run where her BFF got sent home, then her new BFF got sent home after she gave her idol to him, only for that to actually have been secretly given to Jesse. Then she just went home as an easy consensus boot. Ouch. She did make the jury, but Janine was not the god-tier social player I thought she would be. While I think Janine is still a respectable winner pick, and if she'd survived her elimination, she could have recovered gracefully, there's no way I can get any points here. She was the first juror. Next, we have James, the recipient of the Aubrey Bracco Award for most likely to overuse metaphors. James is a chess player, and I was certain this guy was going to be dropping chess metaphors and analogies all day long. We did get 2 or 3 out of him, but come on, Survivor, we wanted more. Okay, so I thought he'd be giving us Aubrey tier analogies all day in the confessionals, but what about his game? As for James, I think he's going to do very well in this game. Despite all the strategy talk, his strengths are going to be in his social game. I like his strategy of just being himself and being vulnerable with others. He wants to put relationships first, like his favorite players Earl and Cirie. But I do worry that he might get caught up in fulfilling the chess grandmaster role. He also mentions planting fake idols and advantages for others to find, which is a dangerous thing to be scheming up before the season even starts. I'm glad James had the common sense to focus on building his relationships rather than building fake idols. James was taken out when he was because he was such a social threat. So I think my read was pretty spot on, and I'm going to give myself 1 full point here for that, which I believe is also how many points you get when you get a pawn to the other side of the chessboard. That's how chess is played, right? The other boot in the double boot episode was Ryan, and I gave him the Tai Trang Award for most likely to be extremely wholesome. No lie detected. Here's what I said about Ryan before the season started. I think Ryan's good-natured affability and big heart don't really get conveyed in the written format, which is why I'm guessing he doesn't have a ton of preseason hype. But just listening to him talk, it's so clear that Ryan is a major presence in the best possible way. This guy just has a comforting aura, which I think is going to be to his benefit. I think he's such a physical necessity that he'll soar to the merge, but he's also got this non-threatening presence that might allow him to sneak by there, too. Ryan was so wholesome that he was, frankly, too nice for this game. He really was a bright light on this season. Dude just wanted to fish, bro down with Geo, and hard carry Coco to the merge and challenges. I do think that outside of Cassidy, Ryan was well liked and was generally viewed as a non-threatening guy that the majority could dump at any time, so I'll give myself a full point here. Preseason, I compared Ryan to JP Hilsebeck, and I think that's a pretty good parallel, and things like that. Next is Noelle, who I gave the Tiffany Seeley Award for most likely to get an episode 1 intro package. Duh. Survivor milked Noelle's incredible story harder than Purple Kelly at a Nicaraguan dairy farm. It wasn't that hard to anticipate that Noelle's backstory would be explored in the first episode, but what else did I think? I hesitantly say she'll make the merge, but I am worried about her socially. Noelle is smart, tough, and confident, and that is exactly how she comes off. I can totally see the other players being intimidated by her and wanting to get her out mid or late pre-merge before she starts to run away with things. I mean, she has a gold medal in the 100-meter dash. Running away with things is kind of her specialty. So, Noelle had a pretty shaky start to the game when her ally Justine was blindsided, but she recovered incredibly well and navigated a tricky post-merge where she had to make new allies quickly. Of course, her downfall was the reward challenge she won in her boot episode, literally the greatest come-from-behind win of all time. I thought Noelle would have trouble managing the other players' perceptions of her, which was true. But I also thought her headstrong personality would be a bigger liability than it was. Even though her name says otherwise, I'm gonna take the L here and give myself only half a point. Moving on to the person who was probably my biggest surprise of the season, Sammy, who I gave the JD Robinson Award for Most Likely Superfan to flame out early. Oof. Here's how I thought Sammy would do. Yeah, this guy is gonna flame out faster than those dogs and cats he's cremating. I'm trying to be nice, but Sammy comes off as not super aware of himself. He says that at first glance he'll be perceived as arrogant, but that's not him. Then he goes out of his way to list all his favorite features about himself. Hey, he says, there's more to him than just great looks. He's also super charming. I think, like every teen who's ever been on this show, Sammy just doesn't have the life experience to be a great Survivor player. That's not his fault, but it is going to be his problem in the game. I'm very happy to be wrong on this one. Sammy was a major surprise in the best possible way. After episode 1, Sammy was probably in the safest position on Baka, and his constant flip-flopping post-merge injected some really fun, positive, and chaotic energy into the season, until it caught up with him. Dear God, future Gen Z players, please model your game on him. I do think a lot of his mercurial nature was because of his young age, but there's no way I can give myself any points on my Sammy prediction here. He did not flame out, like so many Shih Tzus. Moving on to our final pre-finale player, Cody, the winner of the Drew Christie Award for most likely to get an entire downfall episode. Cody was another big surprise for me. I kinda expected that he'd majorly overplay his hand and the edit would dunk on him on his way out the door, but instead, he gave this season a lot of heart, and I was living for more Cody content. Here's what I originally said about Cody. This guy is like if Seabass took uppers. I love that you can just tell his whole personality just from this one photo. I don't even have to say anything. Cody wears his Codiness on his sleeve, and I think that will either be his biggest boon in the game or his downfall. If his tribe embraces the Aloha spirit, then he could be in it for the long haul as an Aussie-esque provider. If they're looking for his off switch after a few days, I don't think he'll fare well. While I suppose you could argue that the penultimate episode was a downfall episode for Cody, to me, a downfall episode goes out of its way to make fun of the player at every turn. Instead, Cody's elimination was presented as a tragic but necessary evil for Jesse, and framed more as a goodbye to a beloved character than a full-blown downfall. Not really what I had in mind. Still, I did predict that Cody would be 100% Cody 110% of the time, and that was both his biggest boon in the game and his downfall, so I'll give myself half a point here. Moving on to our final 5, let's look at Carla, the winner of the Shan Smith Award for most likely to be an iconic new era villain. Well, Carla was iconic in the new era and a villain, so I don't see how I could be wrong here, but what else did I say about Carla? Carla talks about how she's a great liar and there's no line she won't cross. And usually that would be a red flag that someone's gonna play themselves out of the game. But there's just something about Carla that makes me think she'll be able to pull off some crazy Tony-style game. She recognizes the key ingredients to Tony's game. Beyond all the spy shacks and the idle hustle, he was just fun to be around. I think Carla similarly has just got this effortless confidence that draws you in so she can lie straight to your face, and the charisma to pull you back in after she's backstabbed you. Carla wasn't Tony tier, but who is? She played a ruthless game built on using her natural charisma to gain power and information, and it really paid off for her, especially in the first half of the game. Post-merge, her game unfortunately lost momentum, but as we saw in the finale, she fought to the bitter end and managed to turn an obvious vote of herself into what seemed like chaos. In the age of social media where any slight real or perceived causes tens of thousands of social media messages to be lobbed at the players, Carla is about as overly villainous as we're ever going to get again, so savor it. Full point. Next is our fire-making loser and fallen angel Jesse, the winner of the Rick Devens Award for most likely to be the season's final boss. Sorry about this, kind of feels like I willed this one into existence. Jesse was unquestionably the main character of the season and the man to beat for everyone down the stretch, especially after 2 flashy and impressive moves at Final 6 and Final 5. He was the final boss of the season. You know it, I know it, Gabler, Cassidy, and Owen definitely knew it. But why did I think that? I really don't see any red flags for Jesse other than maybe Ghost Island being the season that got him back into the show again. I think understanding how voters think will be a super useful tool on anticipating how others will play the game, and I think his history of going from the streets to the world of academia gives him a unique perspective where he can be relatable to almost anyone. The hype is real for Jesse. I'm feeling like pre-merge, all roads on his tribe will lead back to him, and those connections and influence will take him deep into the post-merge. Jesse will be an endgamer targeted by others as a resume builder. I'm going full point here. I think I read Jesse's game to a T. Pre-merge, he was in charge of Vessi, and post-merge, he and Cody ran the entire game, and somehow no one caught on to them until the very end. I spoke glowingly of Jesse preseason, and if anything, I still underestimated him. His power was so threatening that Gabler and Owen were tripping over themselves to go to fire against him to get a feather in their caps. Unfortunately for Jesse, like any good final boss, he had an obvious and exploitable weakness: fire. Moving on to our final 3, our first losing finalist is Owen, the winner of the Ricard Foyer Award for most likely to be a him Spradlin. A him Spradlin to me is someone who just has that look, the good at Survivor look, someone you can tell is a triple threat at Survivor from a single glance. Owen, I loved him, but he was not that. Here's what I said about Owen preseason. I think he is going to be able to toe the line between high EQ social player, underrated athletic beast, and perceptive strategist super well. Socially, he spends his career talking to students, either convincing them to come to his school or turning them away. Physically, he played football in high school and coaches fitness classes. Strategically, I mean, he's even watched the international seasons of Survivor. Come on. Things will have to go completely sideways for Owen to not at least make the merge. Well, things went completely sideways for Owen the whole game, so there's that. For me, it was heartbreaking to see Owen constantly Charlie Brown his way through the game. We've all had situations where we end up frustratingly out of control, but for Owen, that was his entire Survivor experience. Obviously, an error in gameplay on his part, but there's also just some plain old bad luck involved too. Similarly, I Charlie Browned my predictions of his game, and Lucy really pulled the ball out from under me on this one. 0 points. Our second place player is Cassidy, who I gave the, oh boy, Francesca Hoagie Award for most likely to be the first boot. Obviously, Cassidy was not the first boot. She was not booted at all. But why did I think she would go home first? She says the universe is on her side, and that's kinda why I'm worried about her longevity. I'm just really not sure the rest of her tribe is going to vibe with her on the same groovy wavelength. They're just not striking me as a spiritual bunch. I'm sensing that Cassidy is going to have a tough time connecting with the rest of her tribe right out of the gate. I think if she makes it far, it will be as a number for a more manipulative player, but I think the universe is manifesting an easy consensus boot for her tribe early on, and she's it. Well, Cassidy was joined at the hip with a more manipulative player in Carla, but I'm just desperately trying to give myself undue credit here, much like Cassidy at Final Tribal Council. Cassidy was well liked by her tribe and generally had her finger on the pulse of the game, and she was not the spiritual stereotype I thought she would be, so it's 0 points for me on this one. There's a pattern here though. Last season, I picked Romeo as first boot, he got third. This season, I picked Cassidy, she got second. Let me know who you like on the cast for 44, so I can pick them to be first boot, and then they'll win. Finally, let's look at our winner, Gabler. I gave him the Ben Driebergen Award for most likely to be Facebook's favorite player. Who knew Facebook casuals and this jury of superfans would have so much in common? Here's what I originally said about our beloved Survivor 43 winner. I initially would have pegged him as one of the first out just based on demographics. He's the oldest player on a pretty young cast. But after studying his profile, I think he could be a major force in the game. Mike favorably compares himself to Jeremy, Ben, and Rupert, and I think those are all really solid comparisons. He's got the self-admitted rough exterior, but a heart of gold. If Mike isn't targeted right off the bat for being the oldest guy out there, I think he'll get through the pre-merge and likely end up as an early to mid-merge boot, undoubtedly upsetting every commenter on the Survivor Facebook page for weeks. No matter what you think of Gabler, you've got to admit that him winning is objectively the funniest result of this season. A result which, you'll recall, I actually predicted all the way back during the Survivor 42 finale. My first boot for Survivor 43 is probably going to win it all. Gabler undoubtedly played a game of Survivor. He really was there playing. But seriously, I actually do want to give him credit. He was completely underestimated by everyone, and with Ellie, we saw what happens when you dismiss the Gabler as some kooky old man. Gabler had good reads on the game and his place in it throughout the entire season, and he had an all-time great Final Tribal Council. I think all that plus his Idaho energy did make him a favorite of the more casual audience, but game-wise, I did not anticipate he would Gabler the competition so hard, so I'll Gable myself half a point. These preseason predictions were all over the place. From my pinpoint accurate predictions of players like Gio and Jesse to wildly off-the-mark shots for Cassidy and Sammy, this season was impossible to predict from before it even started up until the final vote was read. The most important thing today, though, is how did my preseason predictions fare for such an unpredictable season and cast? I've tallied my points for the season, and I got 9 points, which was my goal. Hell yeah! I'd like to dedicate my first point to my wonderful viewers, my second point to all of America's injured veterans, my third point to the great state of Idaho, my fourth point... Got nothing else for you. Hope you all enjoyed Survivor 43 as much as I did. It really was the most Gabler-y season of the year. I'll be back next year with more Survivor content, but until next time, don't get idled out.